Associated Press, Obama's Justice Department standing by George Bush secrecy and the things that he's doing. I said I would get to this a little bit earlier. If you just Google, a caller asked about Tony Blair and Francois Mitterrand, all these world leaders involved in the occult. You just Google Tony Blair occult and witchcraft and nail clippings, the weird world of Sherry Blair. Even by the standards of the alternative therapist, said to be used by Sherry Blair, submitting her husband's toenail clippings to a health guru's pendulums, is taking her alleged new age obsession to a higher level. Miss Blair's human rights lawyer has long been the subject of claims about a fondness for weird and wonderful treatments, ranging from Mayan rebirthing ceremony to eating strawberry leaves to cure swollen ankles. So they kind of whitewash it, and they get into bizarre occult practices here in the article. And you can find articles about him channeling the spirit of the light and all the rest of this craziness. We've got it up on screen at prisonplanet.tv for folks. That's just one of the articles. Type in Francois Mitterrand, Louvre Pyramid 666, with 666 pieces of glass and him doing rituals when it was completed right before he left the presidency before Jacques Chirac. And then now we have the Nicolas Sarkozy. Not even French, as usual. But right now, let's go to D.H. Williams. He wrote the story for the Daily Newscaster. Inside source reveals FEMA and DHS preparing for mass graves and martial law. He confirmed they have the tape, but they're not. We're not saying. I've learned the county and who it is. But for he doesn't want to be public at this time. Telling him about mass graves, hardening of government facilities in a rural area of cornfields. They want to know where everything is. And the county official, emergency management, thought that this was a preparation for martial law. But I had D.H. Williams on with us, and he was very, very informative about what Doug Williams. And he'd also been in special forces, so he talked about how they trained for things years before they actually did it, and that he sees that's what's happening here, and we totally clicked with all of our info and my own research. So I wanted to have him back up for the rest of this hour, maybe a little bit in the next hour, and to take your phone calls on a host of issues. But Mr. Williams, good to have you here back with us.
Well, I'm happy to be here, and thanks for having me back on, Alex.
You bet. I was cutting in a lot in those short segments on the weekend, the Sunday show. Recap the total picture here, what's happening, and why this is such a concern.
Well, what's happened recently is there's been a municipal official in a county in Indiana, not far from Chicago. Pull out a map, you can kind of locate the area. And they're required, each county is required to have at least 6 meetings with FEMA officials or Department of Homeland Security officials to set up various programs, plans, gather data, identify infrastructure in towns, and just basically gather a lot of information without telling people what they're doing with it. This individual was part of those meetings, and after attending all the mandatory meetings, having the phone conversations, filling out extensive questionnaires, he became suspicious of the goals and motives, particularly when they were not fully forthcoming to him with information. They would, sidestep answers or give vague general answers to questions.
They were also deceptive in the questions, claiming we want you to harden city buildings for jumbo jets flying into them, and the next, it's for high winds.
Exactly. I mean, there's deception in their questions, and what kind of answer is that? I mean, how do you harden all of your buildings in a county against a 747? That's such an unlikely scenario. It just doesn't make sense.
Being with Special Forces in the U.S. Army, what does make sense to harden government buildings?
Well, I tell you what, I'm not. First thing, I don't believe in a static defense, so I would say that's a bad. My training says that's not a good idea. My concern would be the planning and the preparation. That's what's the real concern. The information about hardening and possible plane crashes. I think that's just the agent trying to cover up what they're really interested in. Also, they may not know fully what the information's for. People are compartmentalized. They are only given what they need in generalities to complete their objectives, and they probably don't know the extent of the plan, even if they can imagine what it might be.
Absolutely. Continue with the overall, what's happening there in Illinois and Indiana and surrounding areas. Recap some of what we discussed Sunday.
Well, basically, this official had some meetings with the DHS and FEMA, other counties. They brought everybody to Indianapolis for a meeting in late December of '08, where they were basically told that, hey, GM could collapse, the economy's in horrible shape, we could see mass unemployment, we could see counties lose up to 40% of their funds, and what's going to follow is unrest and depression. And we need to have a contingency plan for that. We need to be prepared for that, what that scenario describes is being prepared to control popular dissent is what they need to be prepared for.
Because the government's fully hijacked by foreign banks and doing everything opposite of the Constitution or the will of the people. And expanding on that, they also said get ready for mass graves.
Well, the Daily Newscaster has done a lot of stories about how Congress and appointed officials and elected officials are doing exactly the opposite of what the people want. In polls, people will say 80-90% they're against particular financial bailouts. They'll say in polls, there was a recent CNN poll, 96% out of over 1,200,000 respondents said, we believe the Second Amendment gives us the right to carry a firearm. It's a personal individual right. That's 96% of the population. But when you get into the controlled press, you get into the corporate media, that's not the message that you hear. You hear a message that's funded by outside sources.
I agree with you, and we see that in poll after poll. We know the military covertly has been preparing for martial law for decades, preparing for gun confiscation. Now it's all on record with the Army Times coming out and Northcom announcing that they'll remove the governors under new orders and a new million-person civilian army that Obama called for. The Army has now signed the directive, Defense Department Directive 140410. That's 14,004. It's 14,004.10. It's all happening. This is a more organized takeover than even what we saw with Hitler or Lenin. Can you speak to that? The entire battle formation we see forming against us.
Well, I am just very concerned about the existence of Northcom. Northcom should not exist. The fact that it exists, that if people want a smoking gun, that there is martial law already, that it has been implemented, Northcom, just go to their website. That's the proof. Because what is martial law? It is not necessarily a hot shootout on the streets. Martial law is a system of government. It's an administrative command and control process. Well, if that's the case, then we're experiencing martial law right now, and you don't need to go any further than Northcom to find out where it's being administered from.
Martial law is extrajudicial outside the regular government elected by the people. It is rule by a military form of government for an elite, and that's exactly what Northcom is.
To a T. It should not exist. In the 80s, when I was in the military, we had serious discussions about issues like this, and we would have been abhorred, just totally opposed to such an organization even existing.
Well, that's right. In the World War I, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and it started changing in the late 80s. Everybody was sat down and explained, you don't follow an order to take guns. You don't follow an order to put people in camps. You don't follow orders, for this. And now it's the opposite.
It was explained because you follow the chain of command is so critical. It's so important, and people are trained to follow that chain of command without a lot of thought. However, they also drill into you that if you follow an illegal order, you will be punished by the UCMJ. They taught us that the Nuremberg trials proved that I did it because I was ordered to was not a defense.
When we come back, I want to talk about your friends and family and people that are still in the military who have gotten out, where they stand, what percentage you think of the Republic, the people under arms, will defend the Republic, and how you see this playing out. More on the mass graves that they're preparing and the rest of it, the incinerators, according to the Rocky Mountain News. And then your phone calls throughout the hour at 1-800-259-9230.